Hey y'all, I wanted to jump on here after being home for a little bit after my trip to Panama and go over some of the things that I thought were, takeaways from the trip and some of the things that I look for when I'm doing a scouting trip. So I went on a scouting trip to Panama. I'm just getting back. I got my braids out because they were starting to really itch me. And overall, I'll tell you, I had a blast. I had a blast in Panama. But to business, there are some things that I found were positives about reasons I would choose Panama to live, and then there were things that I felt like are challenges that I saw that I would have to overcome. And I'll tell you at the end kind of what my thoughts are if that's going to be the place that I choose or not. But the first list are I'm gonna go over the positives. So I wrote a little list because I can't remember everything, but the number one thing I looked for and the one thing it had was infrastructure. Because I have lived over other places and I have done a lot of travel. Specifically, I'm thinking about like the DR because it to me it reminded me, Panama City reminded me of Santo Domingo, Dominican Republic. It reminded me of that kind of that urbanness. But one thing that Panama City has that's head and heels above Dominican Republic is that it is really built up. It has the infrastructure, it has the roads. There was no outages. You could drink the water, which you cannot drink in Dominican Republic. And I remember thinking that that's one thing I learned about myself is that I need to be able to drink the water. Even if I don't, I still like filtered water. But it's something comforting to me to know about the infrastructure that it can facilitate clean water. So Panama, you can drink the water. I didn't experience any outages like I did in Dominican Republic. And when I say Dominican Republic, I stayed in both Santo Domingo and on the Punta Cana side, the very touristy, very built up sides, and I still was experiencing these infrastructure issues that I did not experience in Panama City. Another thing that I really liked about Panama is that I did not have to worry about conversion. So when you're traveling, especially overseas, you have to really think about a lot of things, language, translation. You have to think about currency conversion. And one thing that makes me antsy if I'm paying bills or something like that, which I was paying, like I lived in Italy for a couple of years, and also living in Dominican Republic where you have to transfer money and pay bills and things like that. I like the fact that in Panama it's the US dollar. I do not have to worry about any type of currency exchange or the anxiety if you're over in Europe specifically of that euro sometimes dominating the dollar and having to feel like you're taking a loss. I don't have that anxiety and I wouldn't have that anxiety in Panama, and that's definitely a plus. Another thing was the time zone. Um, I'm gonna do a part two because I think I'm not gonna have enough time to do all of this in part one. So y'all follow me for part two and on my YouTube channel as well. But the time zone, I think is so important, and I experienced living over in or visiting for very long periods of time in Lima, Peru, and that they were on the Eastern Standard time zone too. Is so is Panama, and that was the first time I thought, hey, this is important to me because you don't think about how it's important to you until it's in your face. So when I was in Lima, Peru, I remember thinking, being able to talk to my friends and family, and we was on the same time, so that I didn't have to wait until like early morning or late evening. I could just pick up the phone and call them. Another thing about the time zone that may be indirectly related to it, but I felt like it was related to it, is my cell phone plan accommodated Panama. So when I got over there, I got a message from Verizon. I have Verizon. Verizon stating that I had the same coverage over in Panama that I had in in the United States, but I still depended on or went and depended on communication through WhatsApp. That's a good habit to have because you ensure that you don't pick up any calls. So if you were not communicating with me on WhatsApp, I was not communicating until I got back to the States. The next thing is transportation. Y'all, I gotta say this is a plus too. Rides, because everything is so compact in Panama City. I literally get an Uber ride for $2. So on the average, it's like $2.39, $2.40. So to me, that was a plus. And they have a metro, and they also have another drive service, and I think it's called like InDrive. But I'll try to put it on the screen if I can find it before I post this video. But yeah, they transportation is very inexpensive, because I think to get on the bus is like 25 cents. It's something ridiculously inexpensive. Another thing that I found was that the locals are very, very accommodating. They they You are not treated differently. I look for that as an African American woman. I'll tell you again, in comparison, when I lived in Italy, you are openly discriminated against. I don't care what anybody says their experience is this or that. I'm telling you, as somebody who lived there for almost 4 years, that in places like Italy, you are openly discriminated against. And the only thing that might change that is if you open your mouth and speak English, because they see you as dollars, like they see dollar signs from you. But if you're just African American, you're brown skinned and you're dark skinned, they treat you like crap. And when I say they, it's mostly the women, because the men, they have an affinity towards black women. They really think you're exotic. And I don't think that in a bad way or a good way. To me, it was more of what they see on TV and things like that. It wasn't in a way where, oh, I'm gonna marry this girl. It's that they think you're exotic. They might want to experience you in the bed or something like that. And the women hate it. They hate black women. They just hate them. So that's that. And then I also have heard told people have told me this in Dominican Republic, but I didn't experience it as much because I was surrounded by Dominicans that protected me. So one of the things I try to do is I try to connect with locals right away, because a lot of times they will protect you from other locals that may want to do you harm or may want to discriminate and things like that. But I had heard a lot of my expat friends say they are openly discriminated against, even in the Dominican Republic, which is a brown place. So the expat community, y'all, there's a major expat community in Panama, okay? There was a huge expat community of Americans and other international travelers, not just Americans, but you won't be alone if you're looking for somebody like you. That doesn't, give you kind of the out to not learn language or anything like that. You still need to connect with the locals, but it's definitely a part of the soft landing that we're looking for. And then lastly is the value for rentals. So I got to check out some rentals while I was there, even though it's not time for me to move or anything. And what you get a lot more for your dollar than what you get in the United States. So on average, you're going to get an ocean view. That is not out of the ordinary. But you're not going to get an ocean view up in the United States, not for $2,000 or less. But you can get it in Panama City. I'm talking about for 1,500, for 1,300. You're sitting looking at the ocean. That is not out of the norm. So those are the things that I found that were positives about Panama City. I'm going to go over some of the things I felt like were challenges and my overall assessment in the next video in part 2. Hey y'all, so I'm back with part 2 of the reflections I had with my Panama City scouting trip that I just finished. I went over in part 1 the positives that I thought about coming away from that trip and why I would consider moving there. But there are challenges that I noted, that also things that I look for in general when scouting. And so one of the positives, though, I left off, and I want to make sure I mention it, so I hope you watched video 1, was that Panama has a lot to do. Like, they have, if you like the mountains, there's the mountains over in Biquete and David. If you like nature, they have these canoe rides you could take, on the Panama Canal, or just out. You could take different excursions out in the wilderness and trail hops and all of that stuff. And then they also have beaches. They got beaches. They have, to me, they have some of everything. They have some of everything, and that was something I hadn't saw in the other countries that I scouted. Now, some of the realities, I won't call them challenges, but they just realities that you need to keep in mind if you're thinking about Panama or becoming an expat over in Panama, really an immigrant. People just don't like to use that word, but it's the cost of living. I'll tell you that from what I saw, the cost of living was not that much lower, meaning that if you're eating out and things like that, and that's something I really don't do because I have children, I usually cook every night, and eating out for us, especially in the United States in this economy, it's kind of like it's just like a treat if we eat out. It's not something we do a lot, but because I was out on scouting and things like that, I did eat out more. I had an Airbnb with a kitchen, but because I was socializing things like that, I was eating out more. And I'm telling you, some of our bills, I'm talking about per person, $70 per person, $80 per person. It was not cheap. It was not cheap. The same thing with the rentals, because I was able to scout and look at different rentals. What I would like to take a moment on my small platform to say is that it's not just expats creating a gentrification of the area. It's also the real estate agents and the owners. And the reason I say that is because my budget, so this is not going to be everybody's budget, but for a 3 bedroom, I want my max budget was 2,500. That's about what I'm spending right now in Virginia, North Virginia, for a 2 bedroom plus a flex space. It's not a complete 3rd bedroom, but that's what I have. And I thought, hey, I'll keep it around the same because I could save in other places. I'll tell you that I tried to negotiate my rent because some people were telling me in areas that I wanted to stay in, which are more the high end areas like Costa del Este and places like that, even Avenida Balboa. They were telling me that $2,500 was tight for those type of areas, which I have to be in those type of areas. I have children, so I'm always looking at what is the best area that I can be in. And I try to negotiate my rent, and a lot of times they wouldn't negotiate, and that is because they have expats that will pay that amount. But it should be a community effort to keep costs down. I didn't see my real estate agent trying to negotiate. It was me trying to negotiate that price down. I didn't see the owners trying to negotiate that price down because they understand that I'm sorry, a local Panamanian would not be able to afford that budget. No matter where they are, they're not going to be able to afford that budget in Panama. I think their average income was somewhere around monthly income was somewhere around 1,300. The average monthly income, so they're not going to have a rent that's 2,000, 21, 23, 2,500. Those spaces are reserved specifically for people bringing in that type of money, specifically passive income if you're coming in on a visa. So I found that cost of living, unless I budget, which I do, you have to stick to a budget. I may be able to save in other places, but rentals was not one of them in my eyes. Now, when you learn some Spanish and you're able to move out a little bit, maybe you'll see the difference. But from what I was looking at, they wanted top dollar for those spaces. You get a lot for the spaces, but they wanted top dollar for the spaces. Um, Another thing is kind of obscure, and I'll explain it. I see a lot of dependency on the U.S. So they use the U.S. dollar, but the Panama and the U.S. seem to be very intertwined. And I picked that up on a tour that I took there, an orientation tour I took there through Viator, and they were explaining the handshake and the relationship between the U.S. and Panama. Why that's a challenge for me is because I kind of want to be somewhere U.S. independent. It's not anywhere such thing in the world that's completely U.S. independent, but I don't want any of the riffraff and what's going on in the political system in the U.S. to impact my new life that I've made somewhere else. And I kind of see that as a possibility with the way that money is exchanged and the dependency on the U.S. People might argue with me, and maybe I'll change that over time, but I saw that as a negative. The next thing is you have to be used to or conducive to urban living if you're wanting to live in Panama City. So when I say urban living, I'm talking about you probably used to like the bigger metropolitan areas, living in the city, not in the suburbs like the city of in New York or in Miami or even Atlanta. That I didn't take as a positive is because I didn't like how the streets were kept. Even in the touristy areas, I felt like the streets and things were still a little gritty for my taste. Still you can be walking and then all of a sudden you have to maneuver up around a big pile of trash bags somebody just tossed out there. That kind of stuff ruins my experience because I'm a walker. I like to get out and walk. Now, they had areas that are very expensive that were not in Panama City, that was like 10, 15 minutes out, like Costa del Este. That is the place that I chose to live. You won't see that, but you're paying top dollar to live there. You're paying top dollar to live there. Even place area called Panama Pacifico or Panama. Um, you're paying top dollar, but they were very clean areas. So, and I'm sure that might change if I would have went out to Coronado, which is their beach community. But also keep in mind that if you go outside the city too far and you're new, that could be very isolating, especially if you're trying to connect with other expats and things like that. And you want to speak English until you grasp the language, things like that. The weather, it rained a lot. I came in on the end of the rainy season because they have a rainy and dry season. And even at the end and here in December, I found myself needing an umbrella like every single day. And does it rain all day? No, but it does rain a lot. And the rain isn't like just sprinkles, it can really come down on you. So that's something you would have to take in consideration too. But I found overall the weather to be nice because I am depressed being back here in the United States in North Virginia. It is cold, it's freezing, it's snow on the ground, and I'm missing Panama right now. Schools, kids' schools. We know, I'm already telling you, stay away from the public schools. It's just not up to par. But the international schools there, which are up to par, that is the private English speaking schools, the cost is out of this world. I'm talking about for two children on average for me, it would be $1,500 a month. But that's not it. You have to pay for the entry fee, which is a couple of $1,000s. Then you have to pay for some kind of investment fee. And this is at all of them. It's some kind of investment fee where it's just money you're giving to the school for them to keep up whatever they need to keep up. And some of those costs are reoccurring each year. I thought the costs were ridiculous. But if I moved there, I most likely would bite the bullet because I want my children to fully integrate and have friends. Another thing, just a side note, partying. They can party. So make sure you're paying attention to noise and things like that. I mean, partying up until like 5 a.m., 6 a.m. They really know how to throw it down. So partying, and on the flip side of that, it's not a whole lot of business happening on the weekends and on holidays and things like that. That's the last of their thoughts. They're not on the same, they're not smoking the same thing that the United States is. They do not care as much as we care about capitalism, about getting things done. You really have to slow your pace down. And so that was mine. Would I live there? Yeah, I would live there. But am I still going to look at this last country on my list, which is Portugal? I'm still going to be disciplined to go check out Portugal. Even though I figured that the weather in Portugal having a winter, I'm already team boycott winter. So that's my take on everything.